of like something dark is happening here. There's no real escape from it. And I think the quote in the book was, "We pay for the violence of our ancestors." And when I read interviews with him, he basically said that he was originally inspired by just the impact of messiahs on history was his idea. The idea of like power structures that, you know, even if the messiah is like a good person, you know, there's entire things that get built around a messiah, and there are bad people attracted to it. There are structures built from him. And
yeah, anywhere where that kind of power is, there's going to be corruption and just, evil. It just seems like it's inevitable at that kind of when someone's power gets that high.
Yeah, no, exactly. And which is funny because it's actually the same subject matter of The Keep, which we'll get into. It was very funny. Herbert and Michael Mann actually delivered kind of similar sort of statements about what they thought their things were about. And I do think that Lynch gets that, but I also think that as a result of what happened to this film, you don't actually feel it. Does have a weirdly kind of triumphant kind of finale. It kind of seems like
there's moments like where, I don't know if we want to get to it right away, but it's like there's moments where you see Paul kind of channeling what you have told me, at least comes within the second book, which sounds incredibly fucking dark. But then it doesn't necessarily show you that tone by the end. We can get into that with more detail, but it's weird because I see hints of it, and then they just don't really make it that way by the end. Or you can kind of even still see it a little bit with Kyle, the way he's acting, but it's just like the tone of the film itself, the music crescendoing, like everyone celebrating, that kind of thing. That's where it feels strangely contradicting itself in a way.
Yeah. And that's just it, is that like there's parts of this where you can feel the, you know, just the like how good the text is just, you know, just having a good filmmaker just like visualize elements of it. You're like, there's something here that's working. And then there is then parts where you can feel kind of, you know, you can feel the sort of production limitations kind of kick in, and it gets a little frustrating. And so I think that's what most people kind of respond to. I think it helped for me watching this film, having read the book, having seen the Villeneuve film. Yeah. So I went into this and I was like, this isn't that confusing.
Yeah, you're like, this guy, guy.
I know all these scenes already. I know these guys. And I had a little bit of an advantage, I think, going through there, like especially going through contemporary reviews where people fucking hated this movie. Ebert called it incomprehensible, ugly, unstructured, and pointless. The worst movie of the year.
Oh, wow. The one thing I would have to disagree, like the other things I disagree with them, but like at the time, maybe if you were frustrated, whatever, but I don't like, this film is not ugly by any means, but anyway.
No. I think like Siskel, he was just referring to some of the intentional design work, like the gross out stuff. Maybe he thought was ugly, which was just something that like Siskel signaled out because he always hated that stuff. But it was one of those things where it's like, okay, but that's clearly like a design choice. He's an ugly character. It's not an ugly movie. The Baron's supposed
to look like Sting does in this. Yeah. You know, it doesn't like the guy should be, you know, pulsating pimples out of his face and all that. Like that should happen.
Yeah, so weirdly enough, going through contemporary reviews, I actually thought Pauline Kael somehow, who had some insane takes back in her day, she ended up kind of the most reasonable on this film and closer to where I kind of landed, where she wrote, he lays out Herbert's grandiose vision of a galactic system with hordes of characters parceled out over 4 planets and a messiah who is preordained to lead the righteous in a holy war. And he brings on the giant man-eating worms and that produce the consciousness-altering spice. But the movie is heavy on exposition, and the story isn't necessarily dramatized. It's acted out and hurried through in a series of scenes that are more like illustrations. And despite the care that has gone into the sets and costumes and staging, the editing rhythms are limp and choppy. And I was like, I think I landed ultimately a little bit more positive than her, but I was like, basically that's my takeaway from watching it. That you know, the stuff that it takes straight from the novel, it's doing decent illustrations of, and I think that's totally valuable. Like it absolutely, there's stuff in here like when Lynch is getting into the just like the weirdo design elements and the body horror in there, like the creepy monstrous like navigator creatures, or the Baron's like rotten physicality, you know, meant to kind of capture his interior and moral rot as just a person.
Yeah.
Or some of the violence, even just with like the Rabin's decapitated head on the throne room at one point, or Fade's very gruesome knife death that he gets. So like all of that stuff is well done. And same with the just the overall look, the gargantuan like space opera, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody like the movie looks and sounds totally competent.
Yeah, it has those very strange, like there were outfits that were kind of reminding me, I guess it's stuff you'd probably see in Star Trek back in the day as well, maybe, or something along those lines. I haven't watched a lot of the older sci-fi stuff, but you know, like Star Wars Episode 1 kind of thing, you know, with Princess I can't remember her name, but she's got those kind of those weird hairstyles that are really massive and just very like eccentric and flamboyant. Like pretty much everybody looks like that in this. Like all the priestess have like bald heads, but then there's a dress that goes up like halfway through to their head, and they all seem to have that uniform. There's a lot of cool production design in this that I would think is pretty accurate to the book, or at least accurate in the sense of like the aesthetic that it gives off when you're reading it.
Yeah, I like the suits worn by the guild members, because they were essentially like body bags taken from a 1920s fire station.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, see, like that's the kind of thing that Lynch would throw in, some sort of like grim, like kind of like old fashioned thing that doesn't really exist.